The history of our story begins long before maps were drawn or crowns were forged. It begins roughly 3 billion years ago, when we were nothing more than atoms floating in the tiny petri dish of Earth. It is a long, quiet journey from those single cells to the moment, about 6 million years ago, when the first hominids, the primate family that includes humans, finally appeared. But the real turning point, the moment we started to become us, happened 1.9 million years ago. That is when Homo erectus became the first to leave Africa, migrating to new corners of the globe, carrying a brain significantly larger than any primate ancestor before them. We weren't the only ones, of course. Around 400,000 years ago, the Neanderthals emerged. They were physically adapted to the freezing environments of Europe and West Asia, possessing facial features that remain some of the most human-like we have ever seen. Yet, they faded away, and we, Homo sapiens, the sole survivors of the genus, rose to global dominance. But how? How did a species of hunter-gatherers end up building skyscrapers and splitting atoms? The answer lies in the mechanism of civilization. Our story truly begins in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, around 4000 BCE, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, in the city of Uruk, the Sumerians did something radical. Instead of relying on hunting animals or gathering berries like our ancestors, they decided to take control of nature. They developed methods to harvest grains like wheat and barley. They invented the cornstone, two simple stones used to crush grain into flour, creating the first industrial process for food. This was the birth of agriculture. We no longer depended on the luck of the hunt. We could create our own food source. This allowed Uruk to explode in size, becoming a bustling hub of over 50,000 residents. But this progress came with a hidden physical cost. The shift from a diverse hunter-gatherer diet to a grain-heavy diet changed the human body drastically. The average height of men plummeted from 1.75 meters down to 1.60 meters. For women, the drop was equally stark, falling from 1.60 meters to 1.52 meters. We stopped being the super athletes of the wild. We became smaller. We became farmers, and we became geographically isolated, changing the very nature of what it meant to be human.
As humanity settled down, different regions prioritized very different things. In the early 3000s BCE, legends speak of King Gilgamesh ruling Sumer, but eventually power shifted. By the end of that millennium, Sargon the Great of the Akkadians conquered Sumeria, proving that civilization breeds conflict. But while Mesopotamia fought, a quiet revolution was happening in the Indus Valley in modern-day Pakistan. The Indus Valley civilization, spanning from 3300 to 1300 BCE, didn't build giant monuments to their egos. They built monuments to hygiene. They possessed a highly advanced toilet system, complete with seats and chutes that led to underground drainage. Sewage was carried away from homes through covered drains, treated and disposed of outside city limits. While the rest of the world was living in filth, the Indus Valley was obsessed with keeping their cities clean and disease-free. Contrast this with Egypt. In Egypt, they weren't concerned with basic plumbing. They were consumed with the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed that when a pharaoh died, his spirit continued to live, ruling in perpetuity. To ensure this, they needed to preserve the physical body through mummification and provide a home for the spirit. Every pharaoh wanted to be immortal. They wanted to be worshipped forever. And so the age of the pyramids began. It started with Pharaoh Djoser around 2667 BCE, who built the step pyramid at Saqqara. It evolved under Sneferu, who built the red pyramid. But the apex of this obsession came with Pharaoh Khufu. Khufu commissioned the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was a labor-intensive 20-year process that remains a marvel of engineering today. His successors, Khafre and Menkaure, followed suit, filling the Giza plateau with monuments to their own egos. To build these stone mountains, Egypt created a social pyramid just as rigid. At the bottom were the peasants and slaves, responsible for the manual labor, farming day in and day out, and physically building the pyramids when the farming season ended. Above them were the artisans, the stonemasons and sculptors, and the merchants who traded gold and papyrus along the Nile. Then came the scribes, the masters of hieroglyphics, who recorded the taxes and the pharaoh's thoughts. At the very top sat the pharaoh. He was not just a king, he was the mediator between the gods and the world of men. The entire society, from the taxes collected to the wars fought by soldiers, was designed to serve this one individual, ensuring his journey to the afterlife was comfortable.
While Egypt looked to the afterlife, China was looking at the water. Around 2100 BCE, the first Chinese dynasty began not with a god, but with an engineer. Agriculture was life, but the Yellow River was a fickle beast. Massive floods threatened to destroy crops, leading to famine and suffering. Legend tells us of a man named Yu the Great. Distraught by the suffering of his people, Yu spent 13 years traveling up and down the Yellow River. He didn't just pray, he built levees and dikes to divert the water and regulate the flow. When the floods stopped, the people hailed him as a savior. This established the Shah dynasty, but more importantly, it established a precedent. Power ought to follow merit. An individual who deserves absolute power shall have absolute power. This evolved into the concept of the mandate of heaven. The rules were simple. Heaven grants the emperor the right to rule. But since there is only one heaven, there can only be one emperor. Crucially, the emperor's virtue determines his right to stay in power. If floods, famines, or earthquakes struck, it was a sign that the heavens had turned against him. No dynasty had a permanent right to rule. In Mesopotamia, a different kind of order was being written, literally. Around 1772 BCE, the Babylonian king Hammurabi decided that a society needed more than just a king. It needed laws. Hammurabi ordered a 7-foot-tall stone slab to be carved with 282 laws that every citizen had to follow. This was the legal system in its infancy. It gave us the famous Law 196. If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. And Law 197. If he breaks another man's bone, they shall break it. But Hammurabi's code was not about equality, it was about hierarchy. Law 199 stated that if you destroy the eye of a slave, you don't lose your eye, you simply pay half the slave's price. There was no illusion of equality in ancient Babylon. A noble's bone was worth more than a plebeian's, and a plebeian's was worth more than a slave's. It was a brutal system, but it created a society based on written rules, not just the whims of a ruler. As these civilizations grew, they inevitably bumped into each other, and when they did, the result was war. In modern-day Turkey, the Hittite Empire rose to power under leaders like Labarna I, who sought to unite the city-states under a single rule. By the 13th century BCE, the Hittites had expanded right up to the doorstep of the Egyptians. The tension came to a head with Pharaoh Ramses II. Ramses, ruling from 1279 to 1213 BCE, was a builder of temples like Abu Simbel, but he was also a warrior. He wanted to reclaim lands lost to the Hittites. The target was the city of Kadesh. Ramses rode in with 4 divisions of 20,000 men, expecting to crush the Hittite king, Muwatalli II. But Muwatalli was one step ahead. Through espionage, the Hittites knew the Egyptians were coming. They fortified Kadesh with 40,000 men. Ramses made a fatal mistake. He split his forces. This left him exposed. Historians believe the Hittites had the perfect opportunity to trap Ramses' army by the river and obliterate them, but for some unknown reason they didn't. The Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest chariot battles in history, ended in a bloody draw. But what happened after the battle is far more significant than the fighting itself. Realizing that neither side could truly win, they decided to stop destroying each other. In 1258 BCE, Ramses II and the new Hittite king, Hattusili III, signed the first peace treaty in human history. The text read, "Ramses, the great king, shall never attack the country of Hatti, and Hattusili shall never attack the country of Egypt." This wasn't just a ceasefire, it was an alliance. A period of friendship blossomed. The Hittites, skilled in metalwork, taught the Egyptians how to make superior weapons and tools. The Egyptians, masters of agriculture, shared their farming knowledge with the Hittites. Trade flourished. Both civilizations prospered because they realized that peace could be more profitable than war. While the old world was locking shields, entirely separate histories were being written across the ocean. In modern-day Mexico, around 1200 BCE, the Olmec civilization emerged. Often called the mother civilization of the Americas, they left behind 17 colossal stone heads. We don't know their names or their specific laws because we cannot decipher their writing, but these heads tell us something profound about their culture. In Mesoamerican belief, the head contained the individual's soul and emotion. Even without written records, these stone faces ensure their leaders remained immortal, staring at us through the millennia. Back in the East, the cycle of dynasties continued. The Zhou dynasty eventually fell into chaos, leading to the Warring States period. It was a time of misery, but misery breeds philosophy. To make sense of the chaos, Confucius developed a system focused on respect, loyalty, and responsibility. He emphasized li, rituals, and manners to maintain social harmony. Simultaneously, Laozi created Taoism. Tao means the way or the path. He taught that instead of fighting for power, one should align with the natural flow of the universe, balancing the forces of yin and yang. These philosophies gave the Chinese farmers a way to endure the hardships of feudalism, where they worked the land for the lords who owned it. And in the West, the stage was being set for a new kind of power. In Greece, city-states like Mycenae and Pylos were developing rigid hierarchies. They were colonizing the Mediterranean because their own land was too infertile to feed them. But among these rising powers, a legend was born in Italy. Two brothers, Romulus and Remus, abandoned and raised by a wolf, would fight over where to build a new city. Romulus would kill his brother and found a city that would one day swallow the world, Rome. We have moved from the first grain of wheat to the first peace treaty. We have built pyramids for the dead and sewers for the living. But the era of the great empires is just beginning. Next, we turn our eyes to the Mediterranean, where democracy, philosophy, and the legions of Rome will change the human story forever.